Let's join together in awakening the spirit that lives within all of us, that we may live more fully and know what it truly means to love and actually be ourselves. So, welcome. Let's explore our sexuality, authenticity, yoga, and human design, all of which intersect and meet at the Cross of Spirit. Hello, and welcome to the Cross of Spirit podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Heron, and I am super grateful to be hanging out with you. Thank you so much for click and play on this podcast and giving me a listen, seeing what I have to share. We'll discover what that is together over the course of however long we do this, and I'm happy to be getting my feet wet and jumping full force into this new endeavor for myself. So thanks for being here. So the Cross of Spirit. Why is this podcast named the Cross of Spirit? Much like the Incarnation Cross is in human design, which mine is the Cross of Spirit, it's offered that we're not often really given a prescription or given a instruction manual on how exactly to enact our Incarnation Cross, which essentially is our life theme. It's something that we discover over time by operating correctly as ourselves. So this podcast is an opportunity for me to discover my unique voice, my unique contribution, and to live what it truly means to be me. And my hope in offering this is that you all can join me on this journey and likewise discover through your own journey what your unique contribution to the world is. I find it quite fitting to be starting this podcast during this exact time, this exact moment where the sun and gate are transiting the 14th hexagram and the 8th hexagram, which in human design are all about the individual process of sort of fueling our creative endeavors and fueling our unique, authentic direction in life with the necessary gas, the necessary support, both material and spiritual, to move us forward, and combining that with this gate that's all about self-expression and the unique contribution that we have to make to the world. So this podcast is an extension of that contribution that I hope to make. And I hope in doing so, not only are you entertained and educated and uplifted, but likewise inspired to follow your own authentic and unique path. You know, in the beginning of something new, the beginning stages of something new, we often encounter quite a bit of resistance. I certainly encountered quite a bit in starting this podcast, most of which was self-imposed. And it's the resistance that usually says something like, you know, I don't have what it takes, or I'm not ready, or, you know, the imposter syndrome stuff that comes up for a lot of us. And much of that can be mitigated by taking the first step. For me, that was pressing record and trusting that the words that come through me are the words that are most needed and that there's value in what I have to share. That value is brought to my offering through your participation, your engagement, your listenership, and whatever value, of course, you receive. So please feel free to stay connected with me, to share your feedback, to share your requests, your questions, your comments, your observations, anything to help make this endeavor not just a solo journey for me, but one that is supported by my tribe, by my community. So this podcast, much like me, is going to be a synthesis of many different things, the various topics and areas of interest that I have explored over the years and that I'm still exploring. Those topics are limited to, or let's say include, but are not limited to, explorations around our sexuality, which I don't know if you can feel it, but is undergoing quite a lot of change right now as the world changes. Authenticity, the ways in which we tap into our differentiated and unique gifts. Yoga, which, you know, for me, for those of you that are familiar with my work, I've been a yoga teacher for the last 16 years or so. So I have lots to share on that topic, and it's an ever-evolving area of study. And human design, which has come into my life relatively recently, I suppose about 6 or 7 months ago at the time of recording this, but has made quite a significant impact on the way that I engage with life, the way that I contemplate my own beingness, and certainly how I understand the differences between all of us and also the similarities. So human design, if you're not familiar with it, is sort of like a personality mapping system, similar to like astrology or the Enneagram. But it's unique in that it combines and synthesizes various ancient esoteric wisdoms, astrology, the Chinese I Ching, Jewish mysticism, and the Hindu chakra system with quantum physics. And the synthesis of those really profound systems coming together gives us something that's never really been offered before until the genesis of human design around the late 80s, where we can be offered a very individualized blueprint, not only for the human experience, but for our unique experience as ourselves. What I appreciate about human design is that it also gives us a sort of user manual, instructions on how to access our uniqueness. It's not prescriptive, doesn't tell you so much what to do, but how to operate in a way that will reveal to you over time why you're here and what it is you have to share with the world. And spoiler alert, what you have to share with the world is not necessarily a job or a vocation, but it's you. It's you being the fullest expression of you. We live in a world that from the time of our birth seeks to sort of homogenize and condition us into ways of being that don't necessarily jive with the unique expression of our spirits. And, you know, it's time now to be who we are unapologetically and to really come out as ourselves in the most authentic way. I am a queer man. I came out of the closet, so to speak, around age 19, and that coming out, cathartic as it was sort of the movement from one box into another box. And I find all of us have gone through some version of coming out in our lives where we proclaim who it is we are. But then as we navigate our journey through life, we might discover that the sort of coming out into a particular category or label or subculture, while liberating for a time, can also start to kind of hinder and hold us back, because there's more to us than just our sexual preference or the labels that we place. There's, in fact, sort of indescribable ways that we are all unique, and it takes courage to kind of come out not into a particular box, but to come out into your own box, right? An ever-expanding box. So that's what this podcast is about. It's about me exploring my sort of second coming out and inviting you all to join me in that process, both, you know, through seeing and acknowledging my journey, but also in seeing and acknowledging your own. So, cross of spirit, what does that mean? Truth is, I don't really know what it means because it's not something that was given to me. It's something that I am. If you are familiar with human design, or if you're unfamiliar, I should say, you're invited to look up your human design body graph chart. And I'll be offering, as I learn more, different ways to engage with your chart, to uncover your unique blueprint, and likewise find meaning in that blueprint in the ways that I am, or maybe in your own ways. So the Incarnation Cross sort of gives us a sense of what the theme of our life is. Ra Uru Hu, the founder of human design, describes our profile and much of our design as sort of like the costume that we wear. You know, all of us are infinite beings. We are born and emerge out of this soup of cosmic brilliance and infinite possibility. But that infinite nature is filtered through these individual avatars that we call us, that I call Rocky. And the avatar is the sort of costume that I wear, has its own unique gifts and its own unique limitations and its own unique strategy for moving through the world with minimal resistance. It's offered that our Incarnation Cross, our life theme, is discovered over time through operating correctly as ourselves. So you're invited certainly to look up your human design body graph chart. You can do that in several places online. You can also do it at humandesignwithrocky.com, and there'll be information there about your type, your strategy, your profile, and your Incarnation Cross. If you're interested in learning more about your Incarnation Cross, you can do a simple Google search for some language that helps kind of provide context to what your life theme is about. You can also kind of craft your own interpretation of your Incarnation Cross by looking at the gates in your conscious and unconscious sun and earth. So those top 4 boxes on the left and right of your body graph will tell you the gates that are most activated in your design. The top 2, the sun and the conscious and the unconscious side, give you a sense of what it is you're here to radiate out into the world, what you're here to offer, to share. Much like the sun, the light that you have to beam on the world. The gates in the conscious and unconscious earth give you a sense of really what grounds and anchors those gifts so that they can be shared from a place of abundance, from a place of support and stability in your life. So my 4 gates, my 2 sun gates on the conscious side is gate 59, which is the gate of sexuality. Gate 16 on the unconscious side is the gate of natural talent, the gate of skills. My conscious moon and my earth, my conscious earth and unconscious earth are the gate 55, which is the gate of abundance and faith, and the gate 9, which is called the taming power of the small, which is the gate of focus, ability to focus on the details. How that particular Incarnation Cross, which comes together as the Cross of Spirit, is described or defined, is that the lessons of sexuality and romance become wise gifts in the lives and experiences of those who are awake and aware. People focused on transforming the relationship between love and loving and sexuality through spirit. And in reflecting on my life, the life that I've lived and that I've explored and that I've been on over these last 36 years, it's interesting for me to contemplate how, despite the various things that I've explored and pursued, there always has been this undercurrent, not just in my professional life, but really in my relationships, of curiosity around ways that we can awaken to a more abundant spirit. We live in a material plane, and the material plane has, different laws that govern it. We have sort of the unfolding of time over a linear construct. And we experience things like limitation and lack and desire and absence, as well as abundance and prosperity and the fullness of life. This gate 55, which I have in an undefined emotional center, is all about riding this emotional energy that takes us from the highs of fullness, experiencing the richness of life, to the lows of sort of emptiness and despair and feeling like things maybe aren't going the way that we've planned. And so I interpret this particular gate of abundance as the ability to experience a fullness in the journey, in the ride, the roller coaster of life, whether we are feeling sort of the abundance of spirit in the more exalted state, or even in those moments where we might feel kind of empty, that there is still a richness in the simple things in life. We can always look around and find things to be grateful for, and we can move forward with a sense of faith that we have the creative energy, the capacity, the vision to manifest the life that we choose on this plane. Gate 59, which is my conscious sun gate, is naturally a huge theme in my life, and I encourage all of you, if you've not done so already, to take a look at that top gate on the right side of your human design body graph, because it'll give you a lot of information about really what it is you're here to share, sort of your life purpose in a sense. Gate 59 for me is the gate of sexuality, which is also the gate of bond making and dispersion. Dispersion being the ability to disperse an idea throughout the world via the relationships that you form, and that those relationships are sustaining, and that those relationships can allow you to be sustainable in the way that you traverse life, the way that you move through the world. And it's been interesting to reflect on the ways that this particular theme has showed up in the various stages of my life. I've always been fascinated by sexuality and relationship and sort of the coming together of two people. And in the earlier phases of my life, that was a very confusing energy. I was so open to making connections with as many people as I could. And because of this sort of abundant spirit that I have, and my quest for finding that in my relationships, whenever I would find it, I would get very attached to the relationship, even if it was just a relationship that was unfolding for a moment or for a night, as the case may be. And I experienced a lot of heartbreak, experienced a lot of attachment, a lot of codependency, and a lot of confusion around, how to hold on to these moments of intimacy that were so nourishing to me. As I've matured, and something that I'm coming to understand more and more, is that, my particular flavor of experiencing this gate of dispersion shows up in the sixth line, which is the archetype of the role model. I'm a 6-2 in human design. We'll talk about that more in a future episode. But how the 59th gate shows up in the sixth line is through the archetype of the one night stand. And there's several different meanings for that. One is those of us that carry this particular theme in our life are able to create meaningful connections, really intimate and profound connections with a wide variety of people. And those connections that we form are not necessarily meant to last, much like a one-night stand. The ability to give your full attention, your full energy, the full expression of your heart to somebody, even if that moment of intimacy only lasts for a moment, or for a night. That is something that I've experienced, and I do continue to experience as I move throughout the world and intersect with various communities and cultures and individuals. I love to connect with people, and I love intimacy. And I suppose the biggest revelation for me as of late is that my love of intimacy is somewhat independent of my love of the other. So when you're someone who loves intimate connections, and that can show up in many different ways. It can show up sexually or physically. It can also show up through intimate conversation or through the depth with which you see the other person and vice versa. But when two people come together or more, there's sort of a third energy that forms. There's you and the other person, and then there's the thing that you can explore together that you wouldn't be able to explore on your own. And that to me is intimacy. My love is around intimacy, not necessarily or dependent on the other person, but certainly dependent on their participation so that we can explore something together. Again, that's something that I hope to play with and utilize this podcast as a means to further explore. These ideas that I'm able to share with the world need to be dispersed, and those are dispersed through the relationships that I form, both with people that I know intimately and also with potentially strangers that just listen, so you are one of those people, and again, find meaning in the words that I say. The other way that intimacy shows up in my life is with myself. For much of my life, I felt very alone. I was raised as an only child. I'm mixed race, raised in a community in a town of people that mostly didn't look like me. And I changed schools a lot, moved around a lot. And so really the only constant in my world, besides my mother, was me with myself. And, it can be challenging to explore intimacy independent of another person with which to exchange and encounter and play. But it is possible for us to have intimate connection with ourselves, which requires deep listening to ourselves, deep listening to the words we hear about ourselves to discern which are worth believing or holding on to and which are worth letting go. And intimacy with the source of life, intimacy with what it is that animates and fuels us, to have a deep, intimate relationship and connection with spirit, however you define that. It's one of the ways that we can move through the world as a conduit, as a catalyst for deeper empathy and greater connection, regardless of who we're with. The other interpretation of the one-night stand is that I often can really only stand people for about one night. When you carry with you this ability to connect deeply with the other, it doesn't always mean that the connections that you form are meant to be lifelong connections. And that's something that I've experienced both on the giving and receiving end of people coming in and out of my life. So the non-attachment that I'm blessed to experience now is a recognition that intimacy is something that either is or isn't in the moment. And if it's not happening in the moment, it can be cultivated with the self. And if it is happening, it can be enjoyed and savored and explored, and then also released when it's time to move on. Your Incarnation Cross, as I mentioned, is informed by the top 4 boxes in your body graph chart, which are significant because they form about 70% or inform about 70% of the way that you're imprinted by the neutrino stream that's filtered through and by the planetary positions when you're born, which make up the personality side of your design, what's conscious in you. I've heard it described as sort of your soul curriculum, the lessons that your soul has come here to learn and explore. And the imprinting of your design, which we call unconscious because it's really the way that your vehicle, that your body is imprinted and encoded a few months before you're born, your physical born date or birth date. And it's unconscious because sometimes we feel like there's these unseen forces that are kind of guiding our lives. And they're unseen because they're sort of found under the hood of our vehicle, right? Our vehicle or our body, our form is being driven throughout our life story. And oftentimes we feel as though it's our personality that is the one doing the driving. And when we do that without awareness, we oftentimes get ourselves in some quagmires. We can crash our vehicle trying to force it in directions that's not correct for us. So much about human design, and really why it's useful to understand your strategy and authority, is that it allows you to kind of soften and settle into a state of almost receptivity or passivity, where you can observe the way that your vehicle operates, honor the way your vehicle operates, and discover what there is to discover along the trajectory that your vehicle will travel. I am a generator in human design, and the role of the generator is really to build and achieve mastery over time. We tend to build and achieve mastery from the intelligence or the power that comes from our sacral. So if you're looking at your design chart, there's a little red square towards the bottom, second from the bottom in your chart. That's the sacral center. If it's colored in, then you're a generator. And what that means is that the way that you will create and build is out of response. We kind of first have to attract something into our physical reality that we can then have a physical response to. That response usually is one of attraction or one of repulsion based on our availability. Generators tend to respond through sounds unless they've been conditioned out of those sounds. It's the sounds that our sacral motor generates. The sound aha, meaning yes, I'm available for this, or no, I'm not available for now. Further nuances to that and distinctions around how generators will respond based on the type of generator you are, we'll explore in future sessions. But for me as a pure generator, I am on this process of really discovering what my Incarnation Cross, what my life theme is all about, moment by moment, through the things I respond to. Over my life, I've responded a lot to the cultivation of various skills. I'm a musician. I'm a yoga teacher, as I mentioned. I love to dance and explore different possibilities in my physical body. And this gate of skills, which is in my unconscious sun, is also kind of the gate of practice, right? When you respond to something and you dive into something, the cultivation of the skill that is developed over time is done so through repetition, through slowly but surely over time coming more and more into resonance with the skill that you're hoping to develop. For me, it shows up in the second line, which is all about natural skills. So I tend to explore the things that I have a natural talent or knack for already, and then cultivate them through practice and dedication. It's a throat gate. And interestingly, I have in human design what's called an open throat or an undefined throat. And so I have a lot to share. I have a lot of experiences to share, a lot of talent, in my humble opinion, to share. But I also know that those talents are not going to be heard or received unless they're invited. right? Unless someone shows up and wants to hear them or asks me to share them. And so offering a podcast in this way feels a little risky, right? I'm not really talking to anybody, and yet I'm talking to everybody. I haven't necessarily been invited to share, but by virtue of you clicking on this podcast and listening, hopefully that means you're opening up your ears and your heart to receive what it is I have to offer. As you go about this process of exploring what your Incarnation Cross is all about, it may be tempting to want to imagine or figure out how this can inform a potential vocation for you or a job that you could have that would leverage these skills. And while that can be really useful, again, the invitation really is to discover what your strategy and authority is and use this moment by moment GPS system that we all have to discover in real time what it means to be you. The Incarnation Cross, your Incarnation Cross, is not something separate from you that's been assigned to you. It is you. And the only way that it can be uncovered and broadcast and brought to life in the world is by you being the truest version of you. I just got back from a camping trip this weekend, which happens annually. It's actually my first time going, but it's a Friendsgiving camping trip where about 50 or more people in my community all congregate in the desert, and we celebrate life and celebrate each other, celebrate the things that we're grateful for, and kind of fuel each other, gas each other up with creative energy to sort of anchor and saturate more deeply in the love of community. It's a really potent and beautiful way for, at least for me, to remember who I am. And that certainly was the case this trip. But in talking to a lot of people on the trip, and not just on that trip, but even just in the world in general, there really seems to be a theme going on for a lot of people right now that's deeply, deeply personal and deeply individual. And what I find really beautiful about human design as it relates to our life is that it offers that we all have a very unique purpose, but it doesn't necessarily say what that purpose is. It does, however, offer that the purpose can only be discovered through receptivity. And what I find is true for a lot of us, myself included, well, I'll just share. For me, I've gone through a phase over the last few months, but really over the last several years, where I felt a little bit aimless. For many years, I worked as a yoga teacher, and I still see myself as a yoga teacher, but as my definition of what yoga is and as the sort of world has changed so significantly, I've really struggled to update and upgrade the nature of what it is I have to offer in a way that I feel really meets the moment and speaks to where we are as a collective. You know, it's not really enough anymore in my eyes to teach people how to do a sun salutation, or to teach people how to teach yoga. Although, you know, I am very grateful for all the students I've had over the years, and I still, I'm happy to be a resource for anybody that's on this journey. What I'm really feeling called to in this chapter of my life is really helping people to awaken to their own authenticity and to discover what it means to truly love yourself. These are always things that I think I've taught and that I've been interested in, but I've never actually embraced that language as it relates to my life purpose. And, having a deeper sense of what it is we're here to teach and share is really, really useful, I think, in bringing increased potency to whatever it is that we're about. Your unique gifts and the things that you have to share with the world are not just to be shared through your job. They're to be shared, potentially in every moment that you are breathing, in every connection that you make, in every area of your life, personal and professional and otherwise. And so if you're finding that right now in your life you're feeling a little bit lost, or perhaps you feel a little tired or that you just don't really have the energy that you once had to kind of hustle and work diligently in the direction of maybe something that you were trying to prove you could do. It really seems like there's this theme right now of slowing down, that if we are operating in an authentic and correct manner, we may actually find that we are encountering what feels like resistance, but I believe it's really the resistance necessary to slow down so that we can upgrade. It's almost like when you plug your phone in at night, sometimes you wake up and it's downloaded like the new operating system, if you have that setting turned on. And if you don't, it'll say, you got to put the Wi-Fi on, plug your phone in, and leave it alone for a while in order for the new files to be downloaded. And that's really how I felt over this last season. And I'm so grateful that, uncomfortable as it can be sometimes, that I feel like I understand why it's happening. I have to remind myself, I'm not doing anything wrong, right? It's not a problem with my diet. It's not necessarily that, I'm depressed, or that I don't care, or, that life is beating up on me. We're so conditioned to be constantly improving, constantly optimizing our output, constantly be generating more money, more influence, more followers, whatever the case may be. And while the nature of the universe is to consistently expand, sometimes we go through seasons where we have to pause and release and recalibrate and prepare ourselves for the next surge or the next increase of life force energy that we're meant to disperse throughout the world. So I'm inclined to put a wrap on episode 1 for now, but I want to leave you with this reminder. Who you are is valuable. There never has been a you before, and there never will be again. The unique contribution that you have to make to this world is not something you have to figure out. It's something that you discover through your authenticity. And if you are feeling the call for deep rest, or the call to kind of turn inward and be a little less busy for a time, I celebrate that, and I honor that, and I understand that. And I have faith that before long, there will be clarity, there will be a surge, and there will be the next thing to respond to that can bring you into deeper resonance with your life theme and the very unique gifts that only you can offer to this world. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Hope you learned something new. Feel free to reach out, connect, share any observations, comments, feedback, and I'll look forward to hanging out with you next time on the next episode of The Cross of Spirit. Be well. Peace.